Natural law is the idea that everybody intuitively understands moral right and wrong on the big issues. That there's a natural design to us, there's a natural design to the universe, that we're intended to go in a particular direction.
Alright, I'd like to talk about two topics that seem to be on people's minds today, and that is religion and politics. Specifically, I'd like to talk about Christianity and Libertarianism, and hone in on a shared tradition I think they both have. And in doing so, I hope to illuminate a political path forward for a Christian nation. So I'm going to start with defining libertarianism, so we're all on the same page there. Then I'll move on to two kinds of Christian concerns and hopefully answer them to some degree anyway. Then I'll give my appeal to Christians, where I'm going to show the compatibility between Christianity and libertarianism. Then I'll delve into the benefits a libertarian political system has for Christians. And I'm going to end with an appeal to libertarians because I think Christianity is important to libertarianism as libertarianism is to Christianity. And as we go through these slides, I'll be using some quotes from Murray Rothbard and Hans Hermann Hoppe. They'll be the main voices for the libertarian side of this. So first, what is libertarianism? Well, here I'm talking about a natural law libertarianism specifically. And we'll go to Hans Hermann Hoppe for a good definition of that. The term libertarianism, as employed here, is a 20th century phenomenon, with intellectual roots in both classical liberalism and even older natural law philosophy. It is a product of modern Enlightenment rationalism. Libertarianism is a rational system of ethics, law, working within the tradition of classical political philosophy of Hobbes, Grotius, Pufendorf, Locke, and Spencer, and employing the same ancient analytical tools and logical apparatus as they do. Libertarianism is a systematic law code, derived by means of logical deduction from a single principle. This axiom is the ancient principle of original appropriation. Ownership of scarce resources is acquired through an act of original appropriation. From the principle of original appropriation, rules concerning the transformation and the transfer of originally appropriated resources are derived, and all of ethics, law, including the principles of punishment, is then reconstructed in terms of a theory of property rights. All human rights are property rights, and all human rights violations are property rights violations. So we see here the key features of libertarianism is that the most basic human right is private property. This is derived from the first use, first own principle, and means that all human rights are property rights. And another feature of libertarianism is its natural law tradition. Rothbard sought and found support for his contention regarding the possibility of a rational ethic and the reintegration of ethics and economics based on the notion of private property in the works of the late scholastics and, in their footsteps, such modern natural right theorists as Grotius, Pufendorf, and Locke. It was the Levelers, and particularly John Locke in 17th century England, who transformed classical natural law into a theory grounded on methodological and hence political individualism. From the Lockean emphasis on the individual as the unit of action, as the entity who thinks, feels, chooses, and acts, stems his conception of natural law and politics as establishing the natural rights of each individual. It is this tradition of natural rights libertarianism upon which the present volume attempts to build. So for this natural law libertarian, ethics is objective and law is a matter of justice. Libertarianism's ethical code is founded on an axiomatic deductive method, as described by Hoppe here. Instead of suggesting, hypothesizing, pondering, or puzzling, Rothbard had offered axiomatic deductive arguments and proof. In the age of democratic egalitarianism and ethical relativism, this constituted the ultimate academic sin: intellectual absolutism, extremism, and intolerance. He set out from the most elementary human situation and problem, Crusoe ethics, and then proceeded painstakingly, justifying and proving each step and argument along the way to increasingly more complex and complicated situations and problems. Using this method, libertarianism builds an ethical system of laws that is a matter of objective justice. And this is important because it differentiates them from objectivism. Objectivism itself has some similarities to libertarianism in its focus on the individual and individual rights, but underneath that it is materialistic and utilitarian. It rejects any notion of God, often substituting in things like greed as sources of altruism, and its view of good and bad is decidedly utilitarian, preferring measures of usefulness or personal satisfaction over any notions of objective good or bad. This reduces law for the objectivists into a means of personal satisfaction rather than a way to achieve objective justice. Now, Christian concerns of libertarianism tend to be of two kinds. The first is that Christians are skeptical of rationalist philosophy, because often along with so-called rationalism comes a denial of God. But libertarian assumptions do not preclude the existence of God. The believer in a rationally established natural law must then face the hostility of both camps, one group sensing in this position an antagonism toward religion, and the other group suspecting that God and mysticism are being slipped in by the back door. If belief in a systematic order of natural laws open to discovery by man's reason is per se anti-religious, then anti-religious also were St. Thomas and the later scholastics, as well as the devout Protestant jurist Hugo Grotius. The statement that there is an order of natural law, in short, leaves open the problem of whether or not God has created that order. And the assertion of the viability of man's reason to discover that natural order leaves open the question of whether or not that reason was given to man by God. So, very emphatically, libertarianism as a political philosophy is not concerned with answering questions relating to the existence of God, and in no way requires disbelief in God. The second kind of concern Christians have about libertarianism is that it's relativistic and hedonistic. Obviously, I'm going to say that's not true. In fact, in libertarianism, truth is considered objective and good is considered transcendent. The natural law, then, elucidates what is best for man, what ends man should pursue that are most harmonious with and best tend to fulfill his nature. In a significant sense, then, natural law provides man with the science of happiness, with the paths which will lead to his real happiness. In contrast, economics, as well as the utilitarian philosophy with which this science has been closely allied, treat happiness, in the purely formal sense, as the fulfillment of those ends which people happen, for whatever reason, to place high on their scales of value. Satisfaction of those ends yields to man his utility, or satisfaction, or happiness. Value in the sense of valuation or utility is purely subjective and decided by each individual. In natural law ethics, ends are demonstrated to be good or bad for man in varying degrees. Value here is objective, determined by the natural law of man's being, and here happiness is considered in the commonsensical, contextual sense. So it's clear that libertarianism holds truth as objective and good as transcendent, not merely the object of cost-benefit analysis. And this is why I wanted to distinguish objectivism from libertarianism, because objectivism is guilty of both of these. It denies God, and it is absolutely relativistic. So what makes objectivism so different? Well, it's that natural law tradition. It robs objectivism of the moral grounding that libertarianism has. If it is admitted that taxation and monopoly are just, then the liberal has no principal moral case to make. To lower taxes is not a moral imperative. Rather, the liberal case is exclusively an economic one. For instance, lower taxes will produce certain long-run economic benefits. However, at least in the short run, and for some people, the current tax recipients, lower taxes also imply economic costs. Without moral argument at his disposal, a liberal is left only with the tool of cost-benefit analysis. But any such analysis must involve an interpersonal comparison of utility. And such a comparison is impossible, scientifically impermissible. Hence, the outcome of cost-benefit analysis is arbitrary, and every proposal justified with reference to them is mere opinion. It really is a moral ground that libertarian stands on that objectivism doesn't have, that should assuage these concerns. So what is my appeal to Christians? Well, the first is libertarianism and Christianity are compatible and complementary. I'll let Hoppe illustrate one of the ways it is. The biblical commandments go above and beyond what many libertarians regard as sufficient for the establishment of a peaceful social order, the mere strict adherence to Commandments 6, 8, and 10. Yet this difference between a strict and rigid libertarianism and the 10 biblical commandments does not imply any incompatibility between the two. Both are in complete harmony if only a distinction is made between legal prohibitions on the one hand, expressed in Commandments 6, 8, and 10, violations of which may be punishable by the exercise of physical violence, and extra-legal or moral prohibitions on the other hand, expressed in Commandments 5, 7, and 9, violations of which may be punished only by means below the threshold of physical violence, such as social disapproval, discrimination, exclusion, or ostracism. Indeed, thus interpreted, the full 6 mentioned commandments can be recognized as even an improvement over a strict and rigid libertarianism, given the common shared goal of social perfection, of a stable, just, and peaceful social order. So on its face, Christianity and libertarianism are compatible, but it goes deeper than that, because libertarianism holds to two presuppositions that it can't ground purely with rationalist thinking. It is the sanctity of the will, which is the source of the individual, which is at the center of libertarianism, and it's a transcendent sense of good or justice. Now, any presuppositional apologist might be able to see where I'm going. Christians have a reason why the will is sacred, and it's because we're made in the image of God. And they understand where objective good and justice come from God himself. So in this way, Christianity is not only compatible, it actually complements and strengthens libertarianism. The Christian worldview is actually welcomed by libertarian presuppositions. And the second is, this natural law tradition is a Christian tradition. You can trace it through Aquinas, Grotius, Pufendorf, Locke, all Christians. You can just go to Aquinas' own writings on it. Whether there is in us a natural law. I answer that, now among all others, the rational creature is subject to divine providence in the most excellent way. Wherefore it has a share of the eternal reason, whereby it has a natural inclination to its proper act and end, and this participation of the eternal law in the rational creature is called the natural law. Hence the psalmist, after saying, offer up the sacrifice of justice, as though someone asked what the works of justice are, adds, many say, who showeth us good things? In answer to which question he says, the light of thy countenance, O Lord, is shined upon us. Thus implying that the light of natural reason, whereby we discern what is good and what is evil, which is the function of the natural law, is nothing else than an imprint on us of the divine light. It is therefore evident that the natural law is nothing else than the rational creature's participation of the eternal law. Now, the concrete benefits for Christians, outside of a theoretical harmony, is that decentralizing power moves decision-making to local and neighborhood levels. This puts more power over individual decisions in the hands of individual decision-makers, people. And specifically more likely heads of households as children are voting, or have the means or influence to make decisions on a neighborhood level, certainly. And this returns control over everything from education to trash pickup back to the property owner. This frees health care in your neighborhood or your city from federal mandates, or your businesses from restrictive federal regulation. It puts the power back in the average individual's hands. And this is particularly beneficial for Christians because it would allow Christian neighborhoods to cultivate a Christian way of life. Without copious amounts of federal mandates on things like housing and employment, it becomes possible for neighborhoods and local areas to create the kind of cultures they want to create. One would be on the right path towards restoring the freedom of association and exclusion implied in the institution of private property, if only towns and villages could and would do what they did as a matter of course until well into the 19th century in Europe and the United States. There would be signs regarding entrance requirements to the town and, once in town, requirements for entering specific pieces of property. And those who did not meet these entrance requirements would be kicked out as trespassers. Almost instantly, cultural and moral normalcy would reassert itself. Every social order, including a libertarian or conservative one, requires a self-enforcement mechanism. More precisely, social orders, unlike mechanical or biological systems, are not maintained automatically, They require conscious effort and purposeful action on the part of the members of society to prevent them from disintegrating. So the Christian would see a concrete benefit that I would sum up simply as being able to live a Christian life. Now, doesn't that sound nice? And so, before I finish, I want to appeal to libertarians in a very similar way I appealed to Christians. Because libertarianism makes bold claims about the sanctity of the will and the justice of natural rights, it needs something deeper than, well, I think, therefore I am, or some Aristotelian notion of a rational creature that puts us above other animals. You still don't get to good. You don't quite get to a sacred will or individual rights, or the sanctity of them anyway, on those foundations. You need something deeper, and Christianity provides them. But maybe more importantly, it provides a foundation for social order. See, libertarianism is a political philosophy meant for politics, not for society. The crucial distinction we shall make throughout this work is between a man's right and the morality or immorality of his exercise of that right. We will contend that it is a man's right to do whatever he wishes with his person. It is his right not to be molested or interfered with by violence from exercising that right. But what may be the moral or immoral ways of exercising that right is a question of personal ethics, rather than a political philosophy, which is concerned solely with matters of right and the proper and improper exercise of physical violence in human relations. The importance of this crucial distinction cannot be overemphasized. So we see here even Rothbard admitting the limited scope of libertarianism. Live and let live is a bad social principle. There are nonviolent, peaceful things people can do, your neighbor can do, and they are still bad neighbors. You still don't want to live next to them. You still don't want to have your kids play on the sidewalk in front of their house. Natural law provides a deeper set of rules by which a society can actually order itself. And I don't think libertarians can scoff at this, because the zeal for natural rights can't simply be limited to natural rights. Natural rights are a subsection of natural law. And for the same reason natural rights are good and just, the other natural laws are also good and just. And so you can't simply like the natural laws that give you political freedom and then scorn the other natural laws that may in some way govern your behavior outside of the political sphere. They're a package deal, and they have to be treated as such, or you simply open yourself up to rightful claims of hypocrisy. And so what are the final takeaways here? Well, what is libertarianism? Property rights and natural law. Christian concerns. Well, hopefully I've shown that libertarianism does not deny God and does indeed affirm objective truth and goodness. My appeal is that libertarianism is compatible and complementary with a Christian worldview. There are benefits for Christians, namely it empowers Christians to live a Christian life. And for the libertarian, Christianity grounds and strengthens libertarian assumptions and gives you a way to live. So with that, I'll wrap this little pitch up. Hopefully I brought some attention to the harmony that can be found in a sort of Christian libertarianism, maybe,